Good evening. Shabbat Shalom. Happy Friday. And welcome to Living Waters, falling deeper in love with God's Word. I am one of your hosts, Lauren Cruz.
And I'm Stephanie Pavlantos. Thank you for joining us and welcome.
Welcome. You got everything up and loaded, Stephanie?
I did.
Or do you need a minute?
Nope, I got it.
I'm looking, it gets darker here sooner, and I'm usually in front of a window and I'm looking at the lighting and I'm like, I need more lights.
I know.
We have three lights on. Well, the joy.
That's why I felt like I turned the light on, another light, because I'm like, oh, it's so dark in here. I can't see
so dark
very well.
Right.
But yeah, I know. 5 o'clock, the sun is like, I think sunset's 5:30.
Yeah.
So dark.
Thank you for joining us, everyone. And we are live this evening, and we are continuing through the book of Luke. We thought we might be a little farther along, but there's a lot in there. The first chapter was packed. We've got a goal of a couple more chapters tonight, but we'll just see. We'll see how far we get. And we're going, if you're just joining us, or if you don't remember, we are going through the Apostolic Writings Bible, if you want to call it that. But it is a very thick writings of the New Testament. It's by Andrew Gabriel Roth. He's been a guest with us, and he has translated the New Testament out of Aramaic and out of the original Hebrew. He's gone to the original language before Greek and before Latin. So
the language Yeshua would have spoken, and the rest of the Jews when they came back from Babylon. So this is they stopped mainly speaking Hebrew and adapted Aramaic. But he makes an interesting point when I was reading that there were some from the Old Testament verses that Luke actually takes from the Old Testament and translates into Aramaic. And so
interesting. Yeah, I have only read a couple. I think I've read one of his. He's got several essays, and so in addition to the Bible, he's got multiple journal articles or essays that he uses to kind of explain various topics that he mentions in his footnotes. And I've only read one of them. I want to spend more time, but I just haven't gotten to all of them.
Well, and he also introduces more than like your regular Bible. He really does his homework and introduces the author of the book that we're reading. So Luke in this case, but if it's Matthew or whomever.
Right.
But he gives a lot of background. So if you missed last week, he had a lot of great info and background on Luke.
Yes.
Basically family life to the time he died and how he died. So it's very interesting.
Yeah. And we probably spent a lot of time on that last week before we even got to chapter 1. But I mean, I learned a lot. That's information I just didn't know about Luke. All I knew is he was the doctor, right? So good. All right. Well, we barely started touching on Luke 2, and we didn't want to get too deep into it because we wanted to talk a little bit about the genealogy and the whole idea of no room at the inn, because that's in Luke 2. And so we can begin. It just starts with, it happens in those days that a decree went out from Augustus Caesar that the names of all the people in his dominion should be written down. So that's the beginning of the nativity story that we know of. And he jumps right in with that verse and gives us this much of a footnote to explain all of that decree. This was thought to be a 2-part decree, that it wasn't just the census. We're always told, and we just think it's just like a yearly census, like we're used to just being counted by our family. But what it was there was a shift in leadership, and Augustus became the new ruler of Israel and Syria and that area. And he took a 2-part census because Israel basically lost their friend of Rome status, and they had to begin paying taxes. or tributes, and they took the two parts. Was the first was for people to return to their ancestral home area, and we'll talk about that. And they were listing their assets. Basically, it wasn't just, hi, it's me and Joseph, or hi, Mary and I are here, but they had to return to their ancestral home and list their assets that were taxable, the property, the home. So and that part. Yeah. And when Andrew was on the show last time, he really made an emphasis that by returning to Bethlehem, that he was going home. They likely had family. He owned property. He owned a home there. And that's why they were going.
Yeah, at least they were, at least they had family there to stay with, even if they didn't actually own but that's where they were from. That's where they were counted. And this, we talked a little bit about the information that he gives in Luke 2, Luke meaning Luke. And when you put together Augustus Caesar and then and also I just make a note here that when we did the intro to Luke, we found that he was the son of the governor of Syria. And that's why Syria, I mean, if you look at a map, Syria is just north of Israel. And so when you look at now, he even mentions here that it was during the rulership of this particular, I'm not even going to try and say his name, but he was a military leader in Syria from 9 to 8 BC. So right before the turn of the next century. But it's interesting that he gives that little information because this is Luke and that's where he's from. He's probably from Syria.
Yeah.
So, or at least that's where he may have grown up if he weren't born there. So those little details are because of who Luke was and who his father was. And he was also in the military as well. So we mentioned that last week, that, he was called out and got and sent to different countries and then came back and spent time with Paul, so we have like a timeline of when he was in Israel and when he wasn't and that kind of stuff. So it's interesting. But those little details, I think, to me, make more sense now why he would mention Syria.
Well, I think, too, he's a military guy. He's used to the rulers. He's, and so he's telling us the structure of the government at this time. And he's,
what's going on.
Yeah, it's stuff that he would have been familiar with. And those are clues that are absolutely used to date things. We're able to look, we can pinpoint a year, a time frame. And the point that I wanted to make about the 2-part census is they had basically a year to go pay this tax. So we're always presented with the nativity that like, oh, they had to go and she happened to go into labor here and this is where she had the baby, just happened. And I think it could be argued that it was planned for her to have, let's wait till you're closer to having the baby. We can go at that time. We'll be with family. You'll have people that can help you and assist you. We have a place to stay. So I don't think midwife family, midwives, aunts, uncles, everybody.
And she wasn't in a barn. She wasn't in a barn. She was probably, and we talked about this last year.
Right.
But the barn was right in the lower level of the house. So you would have had like so-called guest rooms, what we would think of. These were extra rooms that the family didn't use. Those were already taken by other family members. So they slept in the section that was closest to the animals. But it would have been a very warm very warm area, which is why they kept the animals in because they.
So I'll read the footnote.
So we have.
Yeah, I want to actually read.
And Melissa are here. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for joining us. It actually says that the word for lodge, there was no, where it
wasn't
says
it in. That's a Greek word.
It says the Aramaic traditions make better sense in saying there was no room for them to lodge, but somehow the verb to lodge got confused in Greek, and then it says lodge. There was no room at lodge. Yeah. So, of course, the Aramaic reading doesn't disprove the idea that there was there was some sort of fixed building. Like it wasn't an inn. Like we think of hotels, and it wasn't an inn. It wasn't a hotel. Like it was their home to lodge. So
because they would go back to family members who still lived in that area, and then they would stay with those family members.
Right.
So more than likely, because again, we're going to talk about the genealogy, and once we get to that part, some of this will make more sense, I believe.
Mm-hmm. The other point he makes is the word manger, and this is kind of one of his points. Andrew believes that Messiah was likely born in September during the Feast of Tabernacles. And one of the reasons that they would have waited if Mary was pregnant, for them to wait and say, I know you're pregnant, you're going to give birth, let's go home to Bethlehem and give birth. We have to go anyway, right? They would have gone to Sukkot. They would have been with family during Sukkot. A lot of them would have traveled even to Jerusalem during Sukkot.
Because it was one of those feasts.
Right, because it's one of the feasts that they would have had to travel in. So to stage with your family, or to begin Sukkot and travel then later for Yom Kippur, it totally makes sense for him to go. But the cool thing he says is the word manger can be a feeding trough for animals, which is also referenced in Genesis 33:17. But in Genesis, it's translated, instead of the word manger, it's translated as sukkah, which is a nod to Sukkot, which is the covering, or the sukkah, the tent, the covering. So you've got a little bit of a wordplay there as well that could indicate the time of the year that he was born. Another argument that was made too is if shepherds were in the field, they're not going to be there in December. That's a rainy season. December it rains in Israel, and so that they would have been a little closer to home. They would have had to have been in the fields, at a time where it wasn't going to be rainy. September is right before the rainy season. It would have been wrapping it up. So, he gives us lots.
Yeah. And then of course you have the shepherds, and we have to remember that these weren't just regular shepherds. They were priestly shepherds in a sense.
For the temple, right.
They worked for the temple, and they were raising the sacrificial lambs. So the point, so we've talked about this in the past, but just to reiterate, I mean, they were wrapped with swaddling clothes. The lambs were, because they had to be perfect. They couldn't, I mean, I could tell you story after story. I mean, we had a baby goat that was born when late winter, early spring, and just been born, went out, cleaned her all up, ran back into the house to do something. And I maybe came out in a little bit, maybe an hour, to check on her again. And she had literally found herself between the fence and the wood that we had stacked up behind the fence. She had wiggled her way out of the pen with her mama, and was wiggled out upside down and wedged in. And and all I hear is, I'm like, well, come running to the barn because I hear her screaming. So, so these little babies, they can get themselves hurt and become, now if they get hurt, they are
blemished.
Yeah, they're blemished. They're no good for sacrifices. And so they stayed with them. They watched over them. They kept them safe by swaddling them, wrapping them in something. And usually it was the old priestly robes that they would tear apart. So so it's very interesting. But I realized, being a goat mom and a sheep mom, that, they can get themselves in trouble very easily and die. So
I have a question too, because this has always been an argument. Well, he must have been born in the spring because that's when the lambing season is. Do lambs have babies all year round?
Some do, but there are some who give birth in the fall, and some who give birth in the spring.
Okay.
So it's weird. It's interesting because our sheep, if they don't get pregnant, meaning if we don't put them with a male, a ram, during the first time they come into estrus, they stay fertile until the time that they get pregnant. So they will stay fertile until we decide that we want to put them with the male, and they,
So we can have babies anytime. So a spring flock is not necessarily a strong argument for Yeshua's birth in the spring.
No, not the kind of sheep that we have, and then other sheep. But we don't know exactly. There's different kinds of sheep, believe it or not. You don't have one type. So we have hair sheep that actually shed like dogs. We don't have to shear them. Mm-hmm.
You don't have to shear them.
No, and we didn't want to shear, so we didn't want to do that. So we got hair sheep. So there's people who know about that, and then you have the wool sheep. So our sheep are for meat.
Yeah,
and so they may have had, I don't know. They may not have had sheep that they had to shear. Mm-hmm. They may have had a different kind. Mm-hmm. So you don't know. So
you don't know.
It'd be an interesting question. What kind of sheep do they raise? So. Mm-hmm. But anyway, that's off the subject. But it's kind of.
I know. That was a little side, but that's okay. I don't know anything about sheep, so I think it's interesting.
Yeah. So Nettie just said, "Why didn't you want to shear?" Because it's a lot of work, and it's a new thing that you had to learn. It's something else you have to learn because sheep are not.
If they don't get sheared, it's a mess. It's bad for the sheep. Yeah.
Yeah. It becomes a burden on them because it's so heavy.
Okay. So, are we at the point where we are giving his lineage? Have we passed that point?
Do you want to talk? They have about the messengers, the angels that come. And that's always one of my favorite.
Yeah.
Because, we often think, and this is my misconception, but I often think that they are singing. That's the way it's portrayed, right? They're singing glory to the Lord, but they're really not singing it at all. They're saying glory to Elohim in the highest, and on earth peace and good hope to the sons of men. So and so that's just a point. We often kind of think that they are singing this, and I think in movies and stuff it kind of shows it sometimes it's them, these angels all singing. But I just thought that was an interesting point. And he basically, it says it's saying in here. And if you read carefully, it probably says it's saying in other things, but other versions of the Bible. So,
yeah. They also, I'm trying to find the exact verse where he's referring to it. I started actually marking where the footnotes are.
15.
I'm looking for 45 on page.
Really, I'm looking for 81 in this. In verse 15 of Luke 2.
Yeah,
it says, "Then it happened that when the messengers have departed." So we're reading from his book.
We are.
Yeah,
so, I'm on the same verse though. You got it. You got the right one.
Had departed from their presence in heaven. The shepherds talked amongst each other and said, "Let us journey to Bethlehem," or Bethlehem, right?
Yeah.
It's like a little sound. Yeah. And let us see this event that has happened as Mar Yah, which is Father Yah, has made known to us, or even Master Yah.
Right.
But
I love this. Because this is a total word nerd geek thing, and I just thought it was great. So literally, it's translated as "Let's see this word that has happened." So where it says let's go investigate this event. The literal translation says, let's see this word that has happened.
Word is capitalized. So
it is.
Yeah. So it wasn't just a word, you talk about, you have a word for me, or someone gives you a word. No, that's not what we're talking about.
Yeah. It's only used one other place in the Bible. Can you guess where it's used? John 1:1. Yeah. In the beginning was the Word. Same word, capitalized. And it's a reference. Okay, so I love this too, and I went and looked this up, and because this is just so cool with me. I am a firm believer that Jesus spoke creation. He spoke it with his word. And if you do in Hebrew studies, like you can get on a word and it's called stringing pearls.
Yeah.
Where you can, you find this definition and then you go see the next time it's used. Okay. So we know when he spoke, or we know that in the beginning, it was void and the Holy Spirit was hovering, right? He was vibrating over the empty expanse. So guess what that word means? It can mean word. emanation, vibration, frequency, or manifestation. So it's that same vibrating frequency word. And to me, that's totally the creative word.
Yeah.
So for them to say, let's go investigate this, this word, because it's a direct reference to God.
Yeah.
God.
So, and at the end of that footnote, he actually says the shepherds then are using the phrase this way to say, let us confirm what Master Yahweh has told us about this event. So they're wanting to confirm it by going and looking.
Right.
But this word, definitely, they realize that this is the word made flesh, in some way. So she said, so this is Luke 2:15. That is where we are, Melissa.
Right. And Melissa, I'll read it in.
Does she have the book, Melissa?
I don't think she does, but Melissa, in the NASB Bible, it says, let me just go to Luke 2, because what I do when I read this Bible with him is I'll read his translations and how it's different, but then I go back and I look at it in our translation, what we're used to kind of how is that different? How is it wording? So in our Bible, in NASB, it says, when the angels had gone away from them into heaven, the shepherds began saying to each other, let's go straight to Bethlehem and then see this thing that has happened, which the Lord has made known to us. So it's a little different. It says, then it doesn't say anything about the word, So what page in the book? It depends on what book you got, Melissa. In my book, it's page 140. In Stephanie's book, it's page what?
161.
161. He has two different translations, and the only difference are the additional articles and that he puts in the book. So on a fluke, Stephanie and I just bought different ones. They're very, very similar, just a few different articles. So, yeah.
And I forgot, but I wanted to check in Matthew. Because I forget where we heard this, whether we talked about it from one of the books that we read on here. But, we've all been told, like, all the nativity scenes with the wise men are wrong. They shouldn't have been there. Right. But it turns out they're right.
He told us that. Yeah, when he was on the show last year, we went all through the three wise men visit. Right.
And so they were there. They did go to Bethlehem because that's where he was in Bethlehem. And
they didn't visit.
That was just like,
they didn't visit when he was 4 years old. They visited within days of his birth.
Yeah, he was an infant. And so, so if you go back to Matthew chapter 2, it actually starts introducing that part into the story that we know. And just the wise men stopping, or as we know, they were star watchers. They were magi who watched the sky. So it's just interesting. It's I'm trying to find where it is, but it says that, where is it that he came? But I can't find it, and I didn't prepare for that. I know it's in chapter 2.
In Melissa, that's what she's looking for. It's actually in Matthew, Melissa.
Yeah, that's in Matthew chapter 2.
Yeah, that one's more in Matthew, where it talks about how they came and visited him at the house. We're always taught that happened.
Or is it? Yeah, it's chapter 2.
Look around 225.
Yeah, because it's easier, like in our like ESV or NIV, there's headings.
Right.
And he didn't do that here. Here, it starts in chapter 7, the Magi, and he sent them to Bethlehem. So that's where they did head. And so it wasn't until, and then it was shown to them in 12. It was shown to them in a dream that they should not return to Herod. but it says, so when they saw the star, they rejoiced. This is Matthew 2, verse 10. And when they saw the star, they rejoiced with very great joy, and they entered the house. So again, because we have been trained to think it was some shed or some barn.
Right. Or the cave. Right.
Yeah, or a cave. Yeah. No.
They entered the house.
They entered the house. Mm-hmm. And so they entered the house, and they opened their treasures and offered to him gifts of gold and myrrh and incense. So that's the only thing. But they did go to the house where he was born. So, mm-hmm. I've often heard Melissa said, I thought it was later, not 4 years, but yeah, I was kind of like one about 2.
So this is, I remember what he said in verse 2:9, Matthew 2, verse 9. Yes. It says they stood over the place where the child was. Mm-hmm. And that one, it's always translated as young boy or toddler is how it's usually translated. But every other place in the Bible, except for this place, it's translated as an infant. Mm-hmm. And that was the argument that Andrew was saying, that there's no way he could have been a 4-year-old toddler. It's the only time in the Bible it's translated as a toddler. Every other place that same word in the Hebrew use it's infant. It's always an infant.
And this is interesting because his note, again, we're still in Matthew. We went back to Matthew. Mm-hmm. They entered the house. So he writes, Joseph inherited this house at some earlier time, but did not relocate to Bethlehem until the census forced him. So that answers that question, because I was thinking he didn't. It wasn't his house until the census forced him to return home, and also because he knew the Mashiach had to be born in Bethlehem. Okay. Now, doing the full move, Joseph also brought all his other material goods to be registered along with the house.
Right.
But he had to go to Sukkot first to live outside, and he would not have brought Mary into the new house until she was purified from childbirth after 6 weeks.
Right.
So the house was also a safer place to receive. So that's when they're talking about the house. It was a house he inherited, but because she would have been, until she had the baby and was cleansed. So the baby could have been more or less, Yeshua could have been 6 or more weeks old when they moved into their house.
Right.
So there's the answer. So that's what I was. So he said, so the word for boy is closely related to the generic word for male used in Hebrew, zakar, with respect to circumcision, since any male from 8 days to 99 years old may be circumcised. So he was no longer an infant because he was circumcised already.
Right.
When they got there.
She makes a comment, maybe the same, toddler, because of the verse 13. Honestly, Melissa, what I would do is I would go look up both those words and see if they're the same word for boy, because it could be different words. I don't know, child or boy.
So verse 13. Sorry, I'll just it says,
take the child and his mother and flee to Egypt. So this was before they went to Egypt.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and after the Magi left, because the Magi knew not to go back to Bethlehem.
Yeah, so there's no footnote with that. So
yeah.
So that's a little detour, but I think it's worth talking about. So
well, you know what though, you kind of led us right into, so he was born, and then within 8 days, by day 8, he would have been brought to the temple, and that's in Luke 2. He goes to the temple.
Simon,
right? And so here's another thing: Simon was the priest at the time. We always are just told Simon and Anna are just old people that hang around the temple. That's kind of how they're presented in our stories. Right. We're using a Bible, Nettie. We're using the Bible.
It's kind of a book, but it's this book. I have a different book than her. I mean, the same title, but this is by a friend of ours who basically took the Aramaic writings, the manuscripts, and translated those. So that's what we're talking about here. These are translated from the Aramaic, not the Greek, and that kind of thing.
Right.
So
and it's very well researched, Nettie. I mean, I know you can't see it, but
tons of
here's Luke, like that's the Bible, and then all of this is the footnotes that explains this, actually I think it starts right about here. So this part is Luke, and then he's got half a page of footnotes to discuss the
He's
word
done tons
study.
of research on Luke, and all of them. Of course, this is the whole New Testament in this book.
Right.
So, but he does the research on the actual human author who wrote each book as well. So last week, if you want to go back, we did a lot of information on Luke from his research.
Right.
So, but anyway, so this is where you were just about to talk about.
So roughly about the starting 2:21, it says when he was 8 days past, the boy would be circumcised. They called him Yeshua, as the messenger had told him, as the angel had told him. And so they bring him. So I love this. According to what was written in Torah of Maria, of Father God. And so they're doing this because they're following Torah. And so they bring him to the temple, and they have to make the sacrifice of a pair of 2 turtle doves or 2 pigeons. And they have to have him circumcised. Well, the only person that could do that ceremony is a priest. And so Simon met him there, and Simon saying, God promised him you wouldn't die until you saw Messiah. We skip over that so quick, and as a Christian, as somebody in the church, I always thought he was just some guy hanging out at the temple, right? And nobody ever presented to me that Simon was the priest that did this ceremony with them.
And it's interesting because we have Zechariah had been a priest, and now, and so let me just give you, this is extra biblical. So please, I am not saying this is in the scriptures. This is extra biblical information. But apparently when Herod started killing all the babies, he did go after, because he knew about Zechariah's son, John, what we call John the Baptist, who we call. But so the story, the history that is spoken about is that Zechariah was killed protecting his son. So he sent his wife and son away out of Israel to be protected from Herod, because remember, he was 6 months older, so he was under 2, and he would have been killed. So that's a story that's not recorded in the scriptures, but it is recorded in extra biblical information. And I can't tell you that it's 100%. I can't tell you any of that, because it's written in a book that's called The Infancy Gospel of James. The brother of Jesus wrote a gospel. But again, it's more historical. It's not inspired. It's just historical. So just that note. But it's an interesting book. You can find it online and read it all if you want. The Infancy Gospel of James. And he talks about Mary, and that Mary was actually lived in the temple like Samuel did. So it's very interesting. But
okay, so he would have blessed the infant. This gets over to about verse 25. If you want to look at 2:25, there even was a note that Simon's daughter married Herod the Great. Was linked to Herod the Great, was married to him. And her remains, this is actually in the footnote, were actually found with Peter, Mary, Martha, and Lazarus in their graves. And I thought that's just fascinating.
So again, he's finding this stuff out from historical documents.
Right, he's going to different
documents that he's finding them.
In verse 29, it said that the high priest would have blessed the infants, but Simon is recognizing his superior. So when you read roughly about verse 34 or so, and how he's talking about, in 29, how he's talking about Yeshua, how he's blessing him. He's actually blessing his superior. The language shows instead of just blessing the infant, he's blessing his boss, basically, if you want
his
to say
father,
it.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yahweh.
Yeah.
So it says Simon's blessing is towards Yahweh. He has seen his word being fulfilled as he had desired. He is now holding the promise in his arms.
Right.
And Simon is not praying to the baby Yeshua here.
Right. So in the verse, there's actually another play on words and names, just like there was with
36.
Earlier in Luke 1, there was a play, and because of the way the words were put together, we saw the name John, the word John, the word Elizabeth, and the word Zechariah, just because of the way the words were written together. And Luke does it again here with this prayer and blessing that he puts the word Simon to say Simon, which is his name. So I'll read. It's verse 34. Behold, this one is appointed. And I thought this was interesting because it's different from what the NASB says. Behold, this one is appointed for the fall and for the rise of many in Israel, and for your sign of dispute, and in your soul will pass through a spear. That's different. I think that's neat. So the thoughts of many hearts will be revealed. And then it talks about there was a Kana, or Anna, we call her Anna, the priestess, the daughter of Peniel, from the tribe of Asher. So just in that phrase, the word Simon is you hear. So I'm trying to find where that is.
Yeah, that's mine is 90.
You hear
footnote 90. So Shimon or Simon, you hear. Kana or Anna, mercy. And you said Peniel is the base of spell.
Right.
And Asher is who?
Who.
So it spells out you, plural, hear of the mercy from before the face of El, or God, who is Yeshua.
Who is Yeshua, salvation. Yeah. So I think that's just an interesting, it's
a play on words.
It is a play on words.
Understand is very Hebrew-like.
Yeah.
Just like when the angel said, you will name him Yeshua because he will save his people. That's a play on words.
His name is salvation.
Yeah. Right. So we see that a lot in scripture. But it's kind of cool. So
it is cool.
And then again, and it's also talking here. It goes on and talks about, and they would go. So actually what we don't realize that when Jesus gets left behind at 12 years old and he's in Jerusalem, they were going to Jerusalem for Passover. And so this was the celebration of the feast of Parsha or Passover, or Pascha, right? Something. I forget how to say it in Hebrew.
Pesach.
Yes, thank you. Pesach. So when he was 12 years old, they went up as they were accustomed to the feast.
Right.
So then after the day, so I'm in chapter Luke 2, starting in here in 43. Right. So then after the days of the feast were completed, they returned, but Joseph and his mother did not know that the boy Yeshua remained in Jerusalem.
Right.
So this is that famous story of, where's Jesus? Who left him behind?
Right.
And so then it goes on that he just says, and this was interesting because it says that when we read, why were you searching for me? Did you not realize it is necessary for me to be in the house of my father? And it says, when they asked him, he replied, it is fitting that I should be in my father's house. So it says that he was actually kind of like even more, did you not know, phrased as a question. So he probably would have more said it like, why didn't you know where I was? You should have known I would be in my father's house.
Yeah.
So
I've heard too, some people say, he's there for his bat mitzvah. He 12, they do it at 13, not 12. And it would have been in the spring. He would have been bat mitzvahed in the fall, later in the fall. So I just think this is totally me. You know, they're marveled. They've marveled at him, and I could think that he has not completed his Torah training. He has not finished, the training for bat mitzvah. At 13, he's recognized it as a man. At 12, he's not yet. So
he's still a boy.
Right. So they're marveling at the knowledge of a boy because he's not considered a man yet. Yeah. And he has not yet finished his training. So, yeah.
So, but they didn't understand, as you guys have read this, so they didn't understand. It says, and then he went down with them and came to Nazareth and was subject to them. So basically subject to them. Now he had to do what they said. He's in their house, but before he was in his father's house. So he did what his father told him in the temple.
Right.
So there's a difference, because think of it. They probably hadn't been in Jerusalem yet. And at 12, I mean, maybe, no, they would have gone up everything, but maybe at 12, he was finally old enough to go in where the other students were or something. Mm-hmm. I don't know why it made the difference in his 12th year, but he made us, but the fact is he spent time in the temple with the other.
Yeah. So 12 is a big number if you want to go with the numerology of it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It means completion. Yeah. But let's so now chapter 3, because we wanted to at least get through chapter 3, right?
Okay. We have a little bit of time. You can go.
So then he starts out this chapter 3 as, again, we have some Tiberius Caesar is now in the 15th year of reign.
So another very precise date and time. So we can track it.
And we see Abelina. Is that how you say during the peace? So he even tells us who are the priests in Jerusalem.
Right.
So now we're going back to John, the baptizer, or Yochanan. And it says that the word comes to him, the son of Zechariah, in the wilderness. So again, and if you for those of you who didn't listen last week, there are words in this Bible, in this printing, that are both blue and red. So when Yeshua speaks, they're red. And when Yeshua quotes his father, meaning Old Testament stuff,
Old Testament,
it's blue.
It's in blue.
He's quoting his father. And so this part is blue. A voice that cries in the wilderness, prepare the way of Mariah, or Lord, or however, and make straight the path in the plains for our Elohim. All the valleys will be filled, and the mountains and heights will be leveled. The rough will become smooth, and the difficult land a plain. Then all flesh will see the life of Elohim.
Right.
So definitely here, seeing the life of Elohim. I mean, now it's, he's being equated with Elohim.
Right.
Because you're going to see the life, the earthly life of Elohim.
Yeah. Life capitalized. Yeah. And he's quoting, that's a quote of Isaiah 43-5. So this is prophecy fulfilled here.
So of course we know, but this is where, when he's baptized, he goes, again, the words in blue, you are my beloved son in whom I am pleased. So Yeshua goes through the baptism, and we know all about this story. But then after this part, it says in 23, so now we know exactly how old he is. Yeshua was then about 30 years old and was thought to be. So this goes into his genealogy, because this is the introduction to now his earthly ministry.
Right.
So, and you couldn't really be a rabbi until you were 30 years old.
You had to be 30, right? You couldn't even begin until you were 30 years old. So I think that's important to say. And I know we've talked about the number 30 it means expectancy. And so now we have this great expectancy.
So I wanted to ask a question before we read on. So in your understanding, give us your answers, because whose genealogy? So we know Yeshua's genealogy is in Matthew 1 and it's in Luke 3. But are they both, which one is through Mary and which one is through Joseph? So there are things that we've always heard and always know, but he explains it a little differently.
Yeah, it's good. All right, spoiler.
And I've even been in a sermon where the pastor said, "We know nothing about Mary. We know nothing." And it's like, what do you mean we know nothing? We have a genealogy of her life. Yeah. So, but yeah, so it actually might surprise you. So, but so the first one in Luke, or you would have read Matthew if you were reading.
You want to read? I'll read one. You read one.
Yeah, go ahead. If you want to start with Luke, and then I'll get Matthew 1 ready. Okay. So
let's see.
But I'm not going to read the whole thing.
Yeah, I know there's a lot.
Because I can't even pronounce half those names. So
Yeshua was then about 30 years old, and he was thought to be the son of Joseph. Pay attention, Joseph. The son of Heli, the son of Metat, the son of Levi, the son of Melchi, the son of Jahani, the son of Joseph, the son. We get all the way down to Matthias, 31. The son of Amos, the son of Nahum, the son of Elshli, and it gets all the way down to the son of Judah, the son of John, Zerubbabel. And we're all the way up to verse 8. We're still going down.
Are you in Luke?
Yeah, 31? I'm on Luke 31 now. I'm going to pick it up here.
Oh, all right. Okay, I wasn't sure where you were.
Maliah, the son of Menah, the son of Mattatha, the son of Nathan, and that's important. The son of David. So that's important. And then it goes all the way down until we get to the son of Adam. It just follows everything down. The son of Enoch, Seth, Adam, who was from Elohim. So we've got him being traced all the way back to the first, which is important. But also, there's a little clue in there. Nathan, the son of David. So David was the king. We know King David. So we know that Joseph was of the lineage of David, but he wasn't in the royal line. He was from the son of Nathan, and Nathan is the one who inherited Bethlehem. If you were in the royal line, you would have inherited Jerusalem because that's where the king lived.
Yes.
But Nathan, David's other son, he inherited Bethlehem. And so Joseph is of the tribe, or they call it the clan of David, but not from the royal line. He's from the line of Nathan. And I thought that was fabulous.
Yeah. And the note says this proves that Luke's lineage is that of Yeshua's adopted father, Joseph.
Right.
And so, like you said, he had to return to his ancestral home in Bethlehem for the census. Right. That he cannot be descended from Solomon.
Right, because Solomon is the royal line. Solomon is the royal line. Okay. Yeah. You want to read the other one?
So now go back to Matthew if you want, even in just your Bible. So it says in verse 1, this is the book of genealogy of Yeshua, the Messiah, the son of David, son of Abraham. And again, I'm not going to read all these, but when you see son of David, that's Messiah language. Son of Abraham is also Messiah language. So understand that. First of all, that even if he didn't say anything like other than Yeshua, he doesn't have to say son of God, because right away he says he doesn't even have to say the Messiah, because just saying son of David and son of Abraham knows we're talking about the Messiah. So this is where it gets interesting. So we're going all the way. So this one is in a different kind of I don't want to say different order, but he divides.
It almost starts backwards. Yeah. It starts older and gets newer instead of starting newer and getting older.
Yeah. So he starts at Abraham instead of starting back. Like he ended the other one, son of
with Adam.
But he starts with this one with Abraham fathered Jacob or Isaac, and Isaac Jacob. So he goes through all that. And then we get to basically verse 16. And again, we have before Babylon and after Babylon. There were 14 generations and all of that. It says Jacob fathered Joseph, the adopted guardian of Miriam,
I thought that was
who bore Yeshua, who was called the Mashiach.
Right.
So if you read in your ESV or NIV, you see the husband of, but that is not the right word in Aramaic. It means adopted father. So it's not talking about Joseph, her husband. It's talking about Joseph, her father.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I almost think of like Esther and Mordecai.
Yeah.
Kind of like that, a relationship.
Because, again, going back to that infancy Gospel of James, her parents were very old when they had her. Again, just like the whole Isaac thing, with Abraham and Sarah being old.
Right.
And her parents were very old. So they probably died and then left her as left a guardian.
Right. Okay. Here's another thing too, that there's a super huge clue of whose genealogy. If you go back to verse 6 in Matthew 1 verse 6, it says Jesse was the father of David the king. David was the father of Solomon by Bathsheba, who was the wife of Uriah. Different son.
Yes.
Solomon was the father of, and it goes down that line.
Yes, and that's a good point. So you have to see that this is Solomon.
Yes.
I forgot about that. So the other was Nathan, who inherited Bethlehem.
Right.
And this is Solomon. So Jesus, Yeshua, came through the kingly line
from both
David.
parents. Right.
Yeah, but the kingly line of Solomon, David and Solomon, where he came through Nathan's son, who was never king.
Right. Okay, so follow this too, because we always say, okay, so the kingly line is so important, but also think about Genesis 3:8, where it says, your seed will crush the head. So the kingly line is through Mary.
Yes.
Right? And it's her seed.
Because she's born, her line is through Solomon.
Her line is through Solomon. Joseph's is through Nathan. And so
who's not king.
No, he's not king. So her seed is the king. And I just think that's fabulous. And when I read that and kind of put it together, I was like, you go, girl.
Yeah. So she was from the line of kings.
She was from the line of kings. And in Matthew is where the women are named.
Yes. That's where you have like 5 different women.
Tamar is there. Rahab is there. Ruth is there. Bathsheba. These are all, even Bathsheba. There is evidence. Bathsheba was the wife of Uriah, who was not an Israelite. He was in Jerusalem before Jerusalem became the capital. So these are all women who were not Israelites. And so then we've got Mary, who ties it all together as the kingly line, who has the seed. It's just so fabulous. I love that.
And then you have the whole, that again, 14, you have the different, where is that? But it talks about the 14. So you have David, whose number is 14. I think his name adds up to 14. And then you have the 14 generations before and after Babylon.
Yeah.
And I think that even like there was something else significant there about Mashiach, and what his name adds up to. So anyway, so it's very interesting, but you have to understand that one is Solomon, one is Nathan, and that is the telling. That is the thing. So sorry, I know. Nettie writes, it's interesting, but it's hard to keep straight.
It is.
So Solomon is the king.
Solomon
and Mary
is the
comes
king.
from his line.
Right.
Nathan was not a king.
Nathan's just the brother.
Son of a king, but not a king.
Right.
And Joseph is from his line. So you have one.
When they say they have to go home and be counted, they went to Joseph, her husband's home, because he would have been the head of the household. She would have joined his clan because he's from the house of David, but a different clan because a different lineage, and they would have gone to Bethlehem and not Jerusalem.
Yeah. So he just says here, the adopted guardian of Miriam, because the word is Gowra in Aramaic, And so, it does not mean husband.
And so in Hebrew, ish is husband.
Yeah.
And it's not the same word.
Right. It's not husband in Aramaic. And so what they did in translating all this, they just assumed they were talking about Joseph, her husband.
His name Joseph. Yeah. But even if you look at the lineage, there's a lot of, even in Joseph's lineage, there's other Johns and other Josephs. And
there's a common name because it's a common name. The son of Jacob, just like, in Greek, you have you had Alexander the Great. I mean, our daughter's Alexandria because, that's like a big name in the Greek culture.
In Greek culture. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
So, but we don't have but a little over a minute or so too. Yeah. But we wanted to at least end there. So next week we'll probably do chapters maybe 3 and 5 and 6.
Yeah. Yeah. 3 has got a little bit. I've got about a page and a half of notes on 3. 4 is short. 5 and 6 are super short, half page each. So we might be.
3 was what we just finished, right?
Yeah. So Melissa says, I get it. Anthony, Tony. Yeah. I mean, I have so many Anthony's on my side of the family. They're all Anthony or Tony.
Right.
They're all Tony.
Right.
Yeah.
So Joseph's a good Israelite name. So.
It is. All right. Well, thank you. And I think we've got about a minute left. So continue reading in the book of Luke. Make observations, make notes. Literally, when I sit down and read, I just make notes of things. If you notice a number, if you notice a word, go look that stuff up and see what you learn from it. I mean, you just never know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So we had a few notes. Joseph, Jane, Melissa wrote that.
Right.
Yeah. And also in Greek, it's Nick.
Yeah, Nicholas. Yeah, Nikolai. Yeah.
Yeah. There's like Nick, Nikki, whatever. You have like so many, and then you also have a lot of Mikes and stuff, but because it's Minas. So this might relate to what I was saying. I'll tell you. What is Messiah language? That he would have spoken Aramaic when he was on earth.
Right. Well, and Messiah, I think he's asking too. Messiah language is
references to
becoming Messiah.
Yeah.
Little hints in Aramaic or Hebrew that if you heard that in that language, you'd be like, oh, he's that's like a hyperlink to Messiah. That's a Messiah.
So like when a man was sitting and he's like, Son of David, he's yelling out. Mm-hmm. He was recognizing that's Messiah.
You're Messiah.
Recognizing that is the Son of God. That is the Messiah. So
right. All right.
Yes, we're running out of time here.
We are. All right, guys. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you guys live next week. Thanks you. If you missed today's show and want to watch it again or want to tell someone where they can watch this episode, go to lambnetwork.tv, where you will find this show and all of the other live Lamb show archives on the on-demand section of the website. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to tell someone about the Messianic Lamb Network.
We are richly blessed to bring you what we believe is the fullest, most diverse, yet up-to-date progressive teachings, discussions, and prayer programming you can find anywhere on this planet. Be sure to take the tour of the lambnetwork.tv website. I'm Stephanie Pavlantos, thanking you for joining us on the Messianic Lamb Video Network.